disappointed in the board in limiting comments during the work session. It seems unfortunate that you only elevated one voice in the conversation. It feels like you're looking for the voice that supports your ideas and not listening to find the right solution. The big voice you're missing is students. Who is speaking for them? And they should be the center of this discussion and every decision that you make. This board already voted, This board already voted to do 4 days, which you already know I don't agree with. But now you're questioning the district's plan for PD. It was made very clear during public sessions, during the discussion of the 4-day week, that districts that eliminated PD or greatly reduced it regretted it and saw student achievement decrease. We have hired incredible professionals, Dr. Schuff, her team, with lots of years of experience, with lots of schooling. And yet we're not allowing them to use their voice that we've hired them to guide us in a big decision. Why do we hire them if we're not going to follow their guidance? They've spent so much time of their lives in this profession. I trust them as a parent because they have the schooling and the experience to back it up. And they have students' best interests in mind. I know that they do. Things can be adjusted in the following year, but let's not make any big changes, okay? You already voted to drastically change a student's education next year by going to 4 days. Let's not try another new thing by decreasing PD, which has a direct correlation, research shows, to student achievement. I know that teachers are extremely valuable, and I value them. And you can ask my kids' teachers. I support teachers 100%. But you already made changes to support them by going to the 4-day week. You said that very loud and clear, that you did this to support them. So please do not make another decision that doesn't have kids at the forefront. I already feel like my kids are losing. As a taxpayer and parent in this district, I have some concerns about the new board leadership that took over as of January 2nd, 2023. There are many important qualities for board members. I'm just going to discuss a few tonight due to time constraints. The first is transparency. I believe the board has failed to be transparent in the last 2 months in several ways. Emails obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show that what the board said in regard to the superintendent's resignation was very different in public versus what they said behind closed doors. Emails also show that at least 2 board members have met with a company to assist in the hiring of an assistant superintendent. However, the procurement of companies to assist in such search are not even being discussed until tonight, and in executive session, no less. The new board leadership has met in executive session, counting tonight's sessions, 12 times in the last 2 months. Why does this board feel the need to go into executive session so much and not discuss things in front of the stakeholders of this community as they should? The last time this school district saw a change of superintendents, the board only went into executive session 8 times in a span of 3 months. Let's talk about another quality, creating a good work environment for staff. The board has created fear among teachers and administrators that their jobs are not secure when the board's only employee is the superintendent. And therefore, no teacher or administrator should be concerned that the board would overstep their authority and not follow the recommendation of district leadership for renewals, as they are their evaluators, not the board. This board has also publicly criticized the teachers' lesson on social media. This does not create a sense of trust between the board and the teachers. Finally, fiscal responsibility to taxpayers. This board has failed at being fiscally responsible in several ways. One, by getting the superintendent to resign and facilitating an expedited separation agreement due to the board's wishes. This means we would have to pay out the superintendent's contract as well as pay an interim superintendent once they are hired. Taxpayers are now paying a superintendent twice for the same time period when Dr. Schuff was willing to finish out the school year and help with a smooth transition to the next superintendent. Secondly, by going into executive session excessively and unnecessarily over the past 2 months, the board's attorney must be present in these sessions, and the taxpayers end up paying for the attorney's time she is in executive session with the board. Finally, the board continues to go in executive session over the procurement of the new transportation facility, even though the process in choosing of a company is outlined in state statute, which the board has no authority to change. Again, wasting taxpayer dollars spending time talking about something they cannot change. All of this wasted money by the board affects our children. I am calling on Brian Parks and Michael Todd to resign, as they have not demonstrated the characteristics necessary for a board member, and they do not represent liberty. Good evening, board members, district administration, and members of the public. I want to address 2 things in my comments tonight. First is the interim superintendent search profile. I am concerned about the first quality the board is looking for, and I quote, has executive or administrative experience with an educational institution or business. I think the word "or" is the biggest problem, and that the word should be "and." I understand that the board wants our new interim superintendent to have business experience. However, I do not believe that should replace any educational experience. How can a future superintendent understand teachers if they have never been there and experienced the classroom? The board over the last 2 months has made it clear that teachers are their #1 priority, but I am not sure hiring someone with no educational experience is in the best interest of teachers or students. How can a future superintendent understand all the intricacies of running a school district without having any experience in one? I really hope that the board will carefully examine this profile and have an open dialogue with one another, as the hiring of the superintendent is the most important thing that this board will do. Several of the consulting firms that presented indicated in their presentation that there are not enough qualified candidates to fill superintendent positions, so the board must be very careful to attract the right candidates to apply for the job. It is very unfortunate that the board has put the district in the position of having to look for an interim superintendent when we had one that was more than qualified in place and willing to fulfill her contract and allow for a smooth transition. Instead, the district is scrambling, trying to cover the largest position in the district, support teachers and administrators during a critical time in the school year with state testing, hire and plan for next year, and a multitude of other things. Not to mention the enormous task before the district of transitioning to a 4-day week for students that requires an immense amount of planning, as well as preparing to implement a new science, social studies, and math curriculum. The second thing I want to address tonight is the Freedom of Information Act requests. The district/board attorney is now reviewing all requests, which was not done for every single request previously. When a Freedom of Information request is submitted to the district, it states that you should receive it within 14 days. Which I believe complies with state statute ARS 39-121.01, which states those requests need to be fulfilled promptly. Now that timeline is no longer being adhered to, and I have a question. What time frame does the term promptly refer to? I believe that fulfilling these requests promptly is not only important to adhere to state statute, but to build trust back between the board and the teachers, parents, and community members, as that trust was clearly broken when the board stated one thing in public and something very different behind closed doors.
Next will be Tony Reynolds. Our next speaker will be Kellie Zimmerman.
Good evening, district administration, board members, and community members. I see on tonight's agenda the recommendation from GR Recruiting that the board approve paying for travel expenses for both the interim and the full search candidate interviews. I think this is a huge mistake and an irresponsible use of taxpayer money to pay for travel expenses for interviews for the interim search when that candidate will only be here for a year. By spending money on candidate travel, you are taking away money that can be used to support children in their education. This board has already cost this district and therefore our children so much money by deciding not to allow our very capable superintendent to finish out her contract. By hiring a search firm by hiring GR as our search firm, it's going to cost the taxpayers over $20,000 for them to run both searches, which doesn't include additional advertising and other costs like travel expenses for candidates. If you are going to pay for the travel expenses, I would highly encourage this board to only pay for the long-term search candidates who will hopefully be serving this district for an extended amount of time. I think it'd be very interesting to see how much this new board leadership has cost taxpayers since taking over. There's been an exorbitant amount of executive sessions compared to last year, which requires the attorney present, paying out the superintendent's contract, now running 2 different searches for both an interim and a long-term superintendent, and putting the district in jeopardy of being fined by not having the transportation facility completed when it needed to be done by canceling an RFQ and starting over. And I'm sure there are others. I also want to point out that I've still not received my Freedom of Information Act. We are now approaching 6 weeks since it's been submitted. I once again feel the board is not ensuring that these are received promptly as required by state statute. And more importantly, it is ensuring that transparency is not a clear value of this new board.
Will be Kellie Zimmerman.
Good evening. I'm here to talk tonight about Agenda 8.9, which is to approve the Play It Safe for Poor and Playground Surfaces. I want to talk tonight about why I feel this is so important, specifically for children with mobility disorders or challenges, and I hope you will join the recommendation provided by administration and approve this. I first brought this to the district's attention back in October and November of 2022, and I want to thank Dr. Schuff, Mr. Nuttall, Mrs. Camp, and Mrs. Hamrick for hearing my concerns and taking on this project and bringing it forward for your approval. Right now, many of our playgrounds across the district only have wood chips or sand, and that makes them pretty inaccessible for a child with a mobility disorder or challenges. A child with these challenges may be in a wheelchair. They may be using a walker. They may be using forearm crutches. They may be working on independent walking, but they may be unstable and need support. Wood chips or sand with a step down from the sidewalk makes it almost impossible for a child using a mobility device to access the playground independently and be able to navigate it with their peers. Independence for any child is important, but one with a disability, it is even more critical in their development. These poor and playground surfaces will make Liberty's playgrounds accessible to every student and give them equitable opportunities to independently access the playground and make connections with their peers. These spontaneous social connections with other children outside of the classroom setting are critical to children's development as they learn important conversational skills, taking turns, and many other things. I have made it no secret that I have advocated for this because I want my daughter to have the opportunity to navigate the playground independently and safely and have the opportunity to play like any other 3-year-old. And if you approve this tonight, I will be so grateful and happy for her. But more than that, I'm excited that the district is not just making Liberty's playground fully accessible, that they looked across the district and is asking for approval for 5 playgrounds to ensure that every school in this district has accessible playgrounds, not just at the school where the need is currently. I'm so excited for future parents that bring a child to the district with mobility challenge, that this battle will already be fought for them, that they won't have to worry about how their children will get around the playground or have the opportunity to interact with their peers. Over the last 3 years, I have done a lot of advocating for my daughter to ensure her needs are met, and she is given every opportunity to reach her greatest potential. And if I can help make one parent's journey a little easier, one less thing that they have to worry about, everything I have done will be worth it. I stood here over a year ago asking you to support an inclusive preschool, which you did, and my daughter has benefited from that. And I'm asking you tonight to support these playground improvements, to continue to make Liberty an inclusive environment for all of our students.
Board member.
Good evening. I'm here to speak tonight because once again, the board leadership has decided that transparency is not a priority of this board. The board is meeting tonight in executive session to discuss the process of a permanent superintendent search. The question is, why are you meeting in executive session and not having the discussion in open session? No personnel matters being discussed. GR recruiting was already hired for the long-term search at the March 20th meeting. And unless the board is planning on discussing offering Dr. Monroe the permanent superintendent position without completing a search, this discussion does not meet the definition of meeting an executive session as defined by state statute. If the board leadership is considering offering Dr. Monroe the permanent position without conducting a search, I think it's important that the public know that according to public records obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, the district would be required to pay GR Recruiting $15,000 as if they conducted the full search. So the question is, why wouldn't we conduct a full search? To ensure that the district has explored all potential candidates if taxpayers have to pay for this expense anyway. I also think an important question would be, is Dr. Monroe going to be in the executive session with the board during this discussion, as he would then be privy to information that potential future candidates would not have access to since they are not having the discussion in open session. This is just another example of many where the current board leadership does not prioritize transparency to the public. They have been in executive sessions so many times this year, the board agendas have become so small that hardly anything is actually discussed in meetings, and public records requests are being fulfilled between 3 and 6 months. Transparency is a key component in the public's trust. And the current board leadership has not rebuilt trust of the public and the parents after the way they handled the removing of the previous superintendent. The hiring of the leader of this district for the foreseeable future is the most important thing this current board will do before 3 members are up for re-election next year. And who you hire and how you handle the process could very influence voters and the trust they have in you come re-election. Good evening. I want to bring 2 things to the public's attention tonight. First, the planning principle for School 8. I think it's very interesting that the district advertised and is interviewing for a position that has not been brought before the board for a vote as a budget interest. Additionally, a planning principal job description, as outlined in policy GCA, would need to be created or updated, and that was never brought before the board to vote on before this position was posted. There is also no salary schedule posted for a planning principal. It only leads me to believe, and the rest of the public to believe, that the board business is being done behind closed doors and not in the public as it is outlined by state statute. It appears that conversations happened between the board, I'd guess 3, and district administration that they would approve this position at a later time and just move forward. This board openly breaks open meeting law, and there is no other way to explain how the district moved forward on this position without any direction from the board. I think it's absolutely absurd that the board would spend any money on a position that does not involve any interaction with children in a year when we are having to make tough decisions and schools could be losing reading interventionists who play a vital role in our schools working with children every single day. Interestingly enough, a parent on the budget committee relayed to me that this did not make it above the line as a budget priority. So if the board moves forward with this position, it will not be with the support of the majority of the committee. Secondly is item 6.2 on the agenda, the expansion of the gifted program. I just wanted to be very clear to the public, this board's actions and their words do not line up. They claim to care about special education, that it's a priority of theirs, yet there has not been one agenda at any meeting to reflect that. But here we are, once again, talking about gifted education, which is 4% of the entire district population, and the MAG program specifically that they're referring to here is less than 1% of the entire district population. One of the 2 MAG positions has remained vacant all year long. So why would you try to expand a program when you can't even fill one of the 2 positions for this program that you currently have? It is a blatant slap in the face to special education students, teachers, and parents across this district that you have not made their education, their right to services, and their right to qualified staff your priority. Just like the planning principle for School 8, this did not make the cut for the budget committee either. Although it is absolutely the board's right not to follow the budget committee's suggestions, why bother having it? You're wasting people's times. It's clear time and time again that the board only cares about their agenda and only listens to a very select few people that fits the narrative that they have. The truth is that the enrollment in this district is down, and the board can only look at themselves and the decisions they have made, because the demographer was very clear that we were supposed to see growth, and we haven't seen any.